Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. I'm going to start today's episode by asking you all a question. I want you to log into your home router, or router as our American friends would say, and tell me how many devices you have connected to your home network. Because I suspect some of you will have 50 plus devices where by the time you've added up things like your light bulbs, speakers, smart plugs, TVs, satellite, cable, home appliances, doorbells, toys and even toasters. I want you to email me that magic number to techblogwriter@outlook.com. I'll give you a shout out on a future episode. I'm just curious how many devices everyone's got connected to those things now. And now I want you to think about every single one of those devices and how every device could act as a single point of failure on your network. And I think this is especially important, especially when you're thinking about you're probably working with sensitive material or content when you're working from home. But then if we take it a step further, I want you to think beyond your smart home and work from anywhere mindset and think about how electric vehicles will eventually become servers on wheels. And hopefully this has helped everyone see that the current approach to cybersecurity is a little bit outdated and we need something a little bit more robust. And when I wanted to find out more about this and how we build new solutions, I came across the Naoris Protocol, which is the world's first decentralized cybersecurity mesh architecture that is on a mission to protect networks and data for both enterprises and everyday individuals like you and I from data breaches and hacks in this hyper-connected world we find ourselves in. Essentially, the decentralized nature of the protocol eliminates single points of failure within existing centralized networks by turning each connected device into a trusted validator node. But before we get too complicated too quickly, I've invited a guest on today to simplify it and put it in a language that we can all understand so we can increase adoption, increase protection too. So buckle up and hold on tight because today I'm going to beam your ears all the way to Porto, where David Carvalho from the Naoris Protocol is waiting to share his story and open our eyes to some of the threats that are out there, but also offer a solution. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Hey, Neil. So glad to be here. So my name is David Carvalho. I am currently the CEO and Chief Scientist of Naoris Protocol. A little bit about myself. So I have been an ethical hacker for 23 years now. And I have also been in the last decade and something, some years more than a decade, the global chief information security officer for various multi-billion-dollar companies, quite large entities, both in Europe and also in the UK. Some of them with hundreds of thousands of people, and they tended also to be in regulated spaces. Besides that, I have been an advisor in a number of boards for other entities. Mainly, again, critical infrastructure, highly regulated entities or state entities. These days, and for a while now, I advise a number of nation states on cyber war, cyber terrorism, and cyber espionage incidents or matters, both from a strategic and response perspective. All these nations are under the European Union umbrella and also the NATO umbrella. I sit on a number of boards also, or think tanks, if you want to call it that, at academic level under the European Union, in regards to areas like the smart cities or intelligence, for example, risk intelligence, threat intelligence. And I've been involved in the blockchain world as almost like a small OG for 10, 11 years now. Very much focused on that technology as kind of like a massive source of potential for other technologies to leverage. And that's really what I am doing now, completely dedicated to Naoris Protocol.
Wow, there is so much to unpack there. Chief Security Officer, ethical hacking, cyber espionage. I'd love to find out more about how you got to where you are today and how the worlds of blockchain and technology and cybersecurity would collide for you. So can I ask you share your origin story, where your passion for tech came from, or just something that would put you on this path you're on today?
Well, to tell you the truth, all of these things are connected. Yeah. So it was a path of like both love and dedication to this stuff, and a lot of luck that led me to all of these things. A lot of effort, of course. But basically, origin story. I'll make it simple for you. I was a kid, all right. I was in my parents' house, very small village, like maybe 2,000 people or something like that. Probably more cows than people. So it's good that they never revolted. And my dad buys a computer, a 486 desktop computer with a great 2 megabytes of RAM. And 50 megahertz for the geeks. They'll get a kick out of this. And there was not much I could do with it. I really wanted to play games, but I remember I got a game at Christmas, and it just wouldn't run. The computer was not good enough for it. So anyways, I remember really wanting to play, and I really couldn't play much. And so I started dedicating myself to just playing with the machine itself, like what we could do with the system, what you could do on the system, what manipulations you could do on the system. Fortunately, I had some neighbors that were, pretty geeky on it, and they were older, and they taught me a bunch of stuff. And from then on, and starting to learn, basic programming languages, or like getting into C, for example, or getting access. Some friends of mine would pass me, for example, these cats with malware, rats, Trojans on it and stuff like that. I would play with them, and eventually this became a whole thing. And I started doing what you would call today cyber forensics, pretty much as a freelancer. In the internet, nobody knows if you're a kid. And at the time it was just called undeleting stuff. That kind of like very naturally led to a place where, cybersecurity has grown, is mushroomed since we're talking 20 odd years ago. So at that time, if you were working on this space, you probably were some sort of hacker of some kind, or you were working for an agency or a very large company. And so the amount of people working on this area did that probably out of giggles and love, let's say, for it. And that's really how I got introduced to it. And just one thing followed the other. You end up meeting people, create relationships, and working on bigger things. And that was pretty much that. That's the source.
Love it. And if we were to compare childhoods for a minute, man, 2 megabytes of RAM, that was the stuff of dreams when I was a kid. My dad ended up getting, it was a BBC B, which had 32K of RAM. It was the Commodore 64, 64K.
The other one I don't recognize, but yeah, Commodore 64. Yeah, different times, of course. 2 megabytes of RAM. Yeah, of course. That was compared. It was like probably an order or two of magnitude.
Yeah, yeah. So funny though, and the amount of people on here were all inspired by those primitive days of computing. And your path would lead you to what you're doing now at the Naoris Protocol, which is a proactive solution for regulators and companies to help better manage cyber risk, but in real time, as opposed to that reactive regulation, which occurs after the fact. And it's great to see the industry moving towards that. And let's be honest, this space can be intimidating for business leaders. So I want to try and demystify this tech today for business leaders. So can you tell me a little bit more about the story behind the company and some of those problems that you set out to solve there?
Sure, of course. So in context, so the company was created is more of like a research entity, let's say, with a couple of academic entities as well, to see if there was interest. Because myself as a CISO in a large company, I was faced with the same problems really that all CISOs are faced today, which is, you're going to get hacked. It's not the question of if, it's when. And it doesn't really matter how much money you spend. Of course, it matters because it can improve your defenses. But in the end, this is going to happen. So how are you going to react to it? How can you actually try to change this baseline, this truism that is you're going to get hacked, right? So there is no answer to that. There wasn't any answer to that. And I thought, this is bad. And I tried to go and look at other technologies that I was involved with. So, artificial intelligence, distributed principles, including blockchain. And I thought, okay, is there any way for us to marry this? And so this research entity was basically, going to events, and it was myself and Monica Oravkova, which is our current COO, co-founder as well. We were going to events and basically asking people like, hey, of course I was speaker in many events at the time. And so I was around many people that were CISOs or CTOs or so on. And I would ask them, hey, would this be interesting for you? Would you like to completely kind of like radically change your approach to cybersecurity by implementing like completely new tech? And generally the answer was, even though there was quite a bit of ignorance on the area, the answer was generally positive. Mm. And then a year later or so, I remember there was a meeting in Oslo, Norway, with the former chief of intelligence of NATO. I was also on that meeting, a very good friend of mine at the time, that ended up supporting the company quite a bit from the very beginning. And on that meeting, there were other people that were, what can I say, quite heavy hitters on the cybersecurity side of things across other countries. And without me saying a word, somebody brought up the idea, hey, wouldn't it be interesting to use smart contracts and blockchain to actually connect these kind of like disparate places that operate alone instead, and make them kind of like a bigger, like a harder to attack target, let's say. And that for me was like a click, as in, okay, I haven't said anything. It was almost like, like parallel evolution, right? Like you get to the same conclusion by being, pretty deep into a topic, without having any nudge on that direction. And for me, that was like, okay, I'm definitely on the right track. And so we started really hiring developers at that time. At that time, we ended up writing a white paper as well. We ended up pushing ourselves to about or applying to top 15 accelerators in the world, company accelerators, so normal real world accelerators. Many of them backed by nation states, either by large companies or banks or you name it. So we ended up being accepted in 11 of them and winning 8 of them. And so that was exciting, being finalists in 8 of them. In the end, we ended up bringing, some of our advisors from really large companies, multi-billion-dollar companies that are known in the space, into our side, and to help us from different areas. It has been an amazing journey. This is, I guess, I'm not sure if I answered your question fully, but this is the context of the creation of Naoris Protocol.
Yeah, no, you set the scene perfectly there. And to further set the scene for today's conversation, can you tell me a little bit more about the scale of the problem that we're talking about here? Because I was reading before you came on, it's a $10 trillion cyber damage threat that we're talking about here, right?
Yes, it's a shocking number. It's even hard for us to wrap our heads around it, but this is a fact. And it's also, to an extent, a low estimate, because there's many cyber incidents and breaches that are not reported. Mm-hmm. Many of them also happen at the government or nation state level, so they're also not reported. And the damages are many times much bigger than what you would have in a company. Having said that, yes, we're looking at $10 trillion estimate a year in 2025 by 2025 for cyber damages globally. And just for you to have an idea, that's actually, if you think, for example, about the US dollar as the reserve currency of the world, that's actually more than every US dollar held by any country outside of the US.
Wow.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
And if you think about how much is that in terms of like the GDP of the world, it's about 6%. And this is obviously not acceptable. Yeah. And it cannot continue like that. So something needs to be done. And so we decided to really jump head first into this problem and propose a now widely accepted to be kind of like the next step, not just in the space, but in various areas of business, embracing blockchain protocols and potentially dedicated consensus mechanisms like we have in our case to, fundamentally try to change this principle.
And I think you've done an amazing job there of just highlighting the scale of the problem in a language that everyone can understand. So from there, can you tell me a little bit more about how this decentralized cybersecurity mesh architecture can protect networks and data for both enterprises and individuals from data breaches and hacks in this hyper-connected world we find ourselves in, where whether we're at home or in the office, we just expect to work from any device, any network, any location at any time, and with that comes a great deal of responsibility, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's you're absolutely right. Like currently, if you would ask any of my peers, any chief security in any large company or entity, they would all tell you that it's very hard for them to really manage all of their devices and their risks. Just the complexity and the amount of them and the types of them and people working from home and so on and so forth creates a lot of complexity on the system. And I'll start from just kind of like highlighting a couple of truisms.
Yeah.
So one of them is that every computer is, and it is something that you need to understand, or everybody needs to understand, regardless if they are business leaders or just people in general. Every computer, every device that has computing power, it doesn't matter if it's a computer, it's this, or or a smart car or whatever. Every one of these devices is a single point of failure for the network they are in.
Yeah.
And that network is a point of failure for the organizations disconnected to. So if you put your head around that, that means that pretty much every device in the world is a point of failure for more than one thing. What does that mean? It means that basically a hacker, a malicious attacker, through phishing or through a direct attack or exploitation of vulnerability or whatever, can actually take over a device. From that device, take over, for example, its processes, usernames, passwords, and services, and move laterally across an organization or across a network, take over other devices, take over potentially the whole organization and their backups, and, for example, launch a ransomware attack or just, exfiltrate data that might be worth, billions and billions and billions of dollars. A good example of this is, for example, the SolarWinds breach in the US. That was actually the breach of the cybersecurity tool that was breached. That was in many different networks. So that tool was the point of failure towards the other, all these networks that were actually, government networks, military contractors, all sorts of things. It's estimated that this breach has led to one of the biggest wealth transfers of intelligence and military designs and many other things ever in the history of the world by the attacker entities that I'm not going to mention on this call. In the direct damages that related to like the reconstruction of the whole infrastructure, rebuilding all the systems, etc., it's estimated to be at around $150 billion just on this specific attack, and to take maybe 2 years to achieve, which we are getting to the second year now. And after this, I'm pretty sure no one will be sure if they actually kick the attackers out fully. So it's extremely important to very early on detect potential threats that occur in the system. And currently it's very hard because it's very easy for an attacker to take over a specific system that they attacked and disable any sort of security system that's there, if any. And that's it. They pretty much won. So you might have an infrastructure of like 50,000 devices, but the attacker attacks one successfully and they eventually took over your whole thing because they won. Under our principle, it's pretty much the opposite. So we basically put a validator node, a blockchain node into every device. And these devices become watchdogs of every other device. So the more the network grows, traditionally, the more the network grows, the bigger is what we call the surface of risk or exploitation surface. So more possibilities there are for attack and compromise of the whole thing. Under this principle, because every device validates each other, there is a constant communication and interdependency in a very, in a critically secure in the resilient cryptographically environment, which is a blockchain. In this case, a dedicated blockchain for cybersecurity processes, where the more devices join, the bigger is the resiliency of that network instead of just making it weaker. So it fundamentally flips the principle that exists and that truism that we have right now in trust of devices and assurance if they are good or not, and security in general, because it adds basically exponential resilience to environments the more they grow, instead of just making them weaker.
And one of the big standout points there, you was talking there about every device or every connected device, it could be a single point of failure. And if we go back, 10, 15 years, the average home network would have 2, 3, 4 different devices connect to it. Now we're talking 30, 40, 50 and more by the time you add up things like games consoles, digital speakers, tablets, doorbells, toys, light bulbs.
You name it.
Yeah, even toasters, it's just insane, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Do you want to stop your toaster with your phone? Go ahead. Yeah, that's absolutely. It's the future. It's going to happen. Like it's limited by imagination. All of these devices are smart, computation capable devices. They are probably not following any sort of standard, which means that it's perfect for I don't know, a botnet or a virus to take them over and make them the source of something malicious, or take over some other process, for example, not just at home, but even in a company, for example, in an industrial company. You can imagine, for example, in the future, as you're driving your smart car, you're probably going to start hearing about hacks into smart vehicles all the time, because cars are going to be, and are to an extent already, servers on wheels.
Yeah.
That they have basically the equivalent of a SIM card, and they are always connected to some network, and they go in and go out, and they receive over-the-air updates, and so on. But for example, in that example, your life and your family's life might be at risk, right? So it's no longer about your toaster being hacked.
Wow, you've blown me away there. I think that's a great line. I'm going to lift that from you and use that for a long time when trying to explain something in a simplified manner there. The electronic vehicles, servers on wheels, that's exactly what they are, aren't they?
Right, that's right. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, feel free.
So can you walk me through how the decentralized nature of the Naoris Protocol actually helps eliminate these single points of failure that we're talking about within existing centralized networks by essentially turning each connected device into a trusted validator node? Because that seems to be where the magic happens, but I'd love for you to expand on that for me.
For sure. So, there's a consensus mechanism that we have created together with a couple of universities here in Europe called DPOSEC, which means decentralized proof of security, that it doesn't just allow for distributed validation of what is good or trust, etc. If you can trust this device, it maintains its integrity and its trust, etc. But it also ensures that the validators themselves are in a trusted state or in an unhacked state, right? There's nothing malicious there, so on and so forth. This is extremely important because if you have supposedly a secure baseline, as we call it, that this generates, it's very important for that baseline to be known to be secure at all times. And because the more devices that join this network, the more resilient this network becomes to potential threats or subversion or changes, for example, that could be malicious to it, the more sense it makes to actually participate. So it's an environment that's, it's a win-win environment to participate. So participants cannot be deplatformed unless they want to. It's built to be unstoppable per se. So as soon as the protocol is available to all, people can actually join, companies can join. Of course, they would have their own private blockchain networks, let's call them that only they manage. But they would still be part of this kind of like supercomputer of trust, or this global hive mind of trust, let's say, of intelligence as well, where, for example, one device that would have a potential threat there would potentially benefit all other devices with that information, and they could potentially be protected against that. So when you join, for example, with your device, that network, well, your device is no longer a point of failure. It's no longer alone. So it's now relying on a multiplicity of validators under blockchain cryptographic principles that are extremely resilient to attack or tampering. about its own reliability and trust and security of your own applications, for example, or your own system, so on and so forth, right? So it's fundamentally changing the approach of how you deal with devices on networks and how you manage risk.
And I think there is an attitude in some large enterprises that are notoriously slow to adapt to change and to evolve, that as soon as we mention words like blockchain, the business leader will think, oh, but what is it anyway? And what value does it offer my business? And for those people listening, I want to share a pretty powerful stat here. And that is, IBM says that the average breach detection time for a typical large enterprise is around 280 days, which is just insane in this day and age. And the Naoris Protocol, by contrast, that detects breaches in milliseconds. So can you expand on why this is such a game changer for regulators and cybersecurity in general? Because it really feels that way when you compare those two stats.
I mean, let me actually put that in context, because 280 days, yes, this is the time to detect a breach. So current cybersecurity is very reactive due to the nature of the devices being, single points of failure and easily taken over. And there's like no real trusted processes that check it. In other words, when I say trusted processes that check it, is that if you have something on a device that's actually checking them, you really don't have any reason to trust this process. And so you trust it currently because you have been trusting it for a while, or others trust it. But you really don't have any proof right now that it is actually in a secure state, or that it hasn't been hacked itself, right? This is really what we provide. And we do that at a different layer in what we call the defense stack. So the defense stack is many things. It could be like, I don't know, your firewall, it could be your antivirus, your password policy, so on and so forth, right? Your encryption policy, etc., which are all good things to do, and everybody should do them. We are a different layer that are distributed in nature, and we validate the trust of everything that runs on this device, if it's known to be good, if there's no malicious things running, so on and so forth. And the other layers that are centralized in nature, that are vulnerable to tampering and alteration, etc., without anyone knowing. We validate them in a distributed manner using all the devices as validators, really, of this single one that might be attacked. And we validate the other things. So it doesn't matter if the other things are cybersecurity tools, or they are, for example, a database management service or a chatbot application, or it doesn't really matter. As long as they run and they are known to be in a certain state that is good from the manufacturer or whoever makes them, if that state changes, we know you cannot trust them. And you should know you cannot trust them. And all the other devices are going to allow you to do that. So that basically shifts the approach from being reactive to being proactive, where if there is a threat against one of these systems, all the other devices proactively are going to agree in consensus that change is not acceptable, or that piece of malware is not acceptable to be there. And it's indeed a piece of malware, regardless of whatever it is doing to your system, because the people that, or can I say, the devices that are doing the detection are not the compromised devices. They are the other devices that can do that. So if you detect these sort of potential threats early on, for example, in a business or even in your phone, and it can save you a lot of headache down the line, because actually hacks don't occur in 5 minutes. It usually takes, really, that's a reason why, those 280 days are there. It's because an attacker will, for example, compromise, say, for example, a bank, compromise a device, for example, say with a USB drive or with phishing or whatever, or a vulnerability on this device. And it will take him maybe 6 months or close to a year to actually literally own anything on that bank, including their potential backups, etc. And that's when they launch their ransomware attack, and the bank, probably maybe pays, right, to get out of this problem, because they just suddenly they are back into the Stone Age. Nothing works, and cryptography is close to mathematically perfect. They can break it. They need the key. The attacker has the key. So it took the attacker all this time to do that, But if you were to detect these early on and prevent this lateral movement and the takeover of all these devices that took all this time, then you probably wouldn't have a breach, right? You would just have a small incident. So it's really about that.
And it also feels like there was a new law passed at the beginning of 2023 where every business or technology conversation must feature the words ChatGPT at some point. So a question I've got to ask you is what are your thoughts on ChatGPT? Do you see it as the next Superman or humanity's kryptonite, especially from a cybersecurity angle, with a lot of people saying that it can help script kiddies write better malware, it can also improve phishing emails to look much more convincing. But I'm curious, what's your take on this?
Right, what you said is absolutely true. ChatGPT being a language model, a pretty good advanced language model at that, it's not alone. There's others that are as good as or better from the likes of Microsoft and others, or Google. But having said that, it's it's a step into a world where our relationship with technology is going to start to forcibly change, and that's clear for anybody that uses this language model, because we think with words, and that it also thinks with words, ChatGPT might not understand what malware is or what programming language is or what English is. But through correlation and AI methods, it achieves pretty good semblance to what looks like intelligence, right? And that's potentially dangerous. It's also very exciting at the same time. So am I excited about it? I'm very excited about it. Am I afraid of it? I think I will continue always to be afraid of AI in general, especially as it becomes sort of like runaway AI. That is, there's currently isn't any, how can I say, any, good cabal, let's say, of people from, universities or something that can create any sort of like ethics baselines or rules for environments like this. There should be some entity like that, I believe, to try and rain down, some of the negative things that can and will come out of this, and these and many other similar platforms. Having said that, yes, of course, you can use it for phishing. You can use it to improve your malware. You can use it to write potential exploits or find exploits in code. You can use it for all these things, but you can also, as a consequence, use not just these, but other AIs as well to, pen test your code as well and make it better before the hackers do, right? So it's a knife that cuts both ways, both sides. So my point with this is that I am positive about it all. One thing that I would say from a cybersecurity and trust perspective is that there's absolutely currently no reason to trust any of the processes that make ChatGPT or any other environment like that tick. You don't know if the answers are being biased. You don't know the source of data of these, conclusions. You don't know if that's biased itself. Maybe if all the data is from, I don't know, just the US, then it's probably culturally not too sensitive to other places, maybe, or correct somehow. So other things are like, for example, you have no idea about if its systems are actually compromised or not. You don't know if somebody changed the model or not. There's no transparency about any of this. And currently, honestly, without, for example, a distributed tool for auditing that's similar to what Naoris Protocol provides, it's going to be very hard to accept from a central point that everything is fine in something that has so much impact to our society already, to the point that many countries are banning it. Not sure if that's the right approach, but it's definitely part of an exciting conversation. Of course, security and trust and assurance of everything that makes ChatGPT and other environments that are critical, like itself, work, should be incredibly important for society and should be regulated. But we all know that regulators are very, very slow on that direction.
100% with you there. And you've done an amazing job today making this easy for business leaders outside of the space to understand exactly what you're doing and exactly what problems you're solving. But I do suspect we will have a few loyal members of your community listening. So for those people that have patiently waited to the end, are there any teasers you can leave us with about what we can expect this year and what you're going to be focusing on?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So people can expect the release of our chain this year with our consensus mechanism. They can expect also the release of a couple of more products and use cases for our distributed proof of security consensus model and blockchain that are going to be extremely exciting for the Web3 and for the Web2 world. And it should impact pretty much anybody I will not talk more about that, but should impact pretty much anybody that uses a computer on a daily basis, if they so want to join. And that's going to be very exciting for us. We're very excited about that. This is obviously a big tease, but I think there are good reasons for it, and we're very excited on our side.
I think you said just enough to set a few conversations alight right there. And we did start the podcast today talking about your origin story, what put you on this path. So if it's become full circle and you look back across your career, I'm curious, none of us are able to achieve any amount of success without a little help along the way. Is there a particular person you're grateful towards that maybe helped you get where you are? Maybe they invested a bit of time in you that we can just give a little shout out and a thank you to. But who would that person be?
Well, it's actually a collection of people. I don't want to risk sounding like somebody that's accepting an Oscar or something like that. But I'll take that risk. Like I really, in the end, I want to thank the people that loved me and supported me. And that's mainly my parents, my grandparents, my brother, my co-founder, the people that were with us in the company since the very beginning, that believed in me and made the first investments. And I also want to thank, of course, Team Draper that made one of our first investments, and other people that are there, from people from NATO to generals from NATO to people from very large organizations like Cisco and former IBM chief scientists and inventors of the DNS like David Holtzman and others that are part of this amazing adventure that we're going through, and that believed in me in what was pretty much a crazy idea at the time. So all of these people, I really have to thank them and ask them to continue to be patient with me and accept some silly stuff that I do sometimes. And I have much to learn from them. So I really want to thank all of them. I don't have many opportunities to do this, so thank you so much for asking that question. And that's pretty much it. I humbly would like to bow to you all.
What a beautiful answer. We're now going to move on to the Best Picture Academy Award. We're going to look at the nominations now. No, I'm only joking. It was
nobody comes and slaps the host.
Yeah, we could need some music. Need some music just to fade in.
You don't deserve that either.
So for anyone listening, just want to find out more information about anything we talked about today, maybe even join your community or just dive a little bit deeper into the topics we discussed, what's the best starting point for everything?
Well, I would say, if the person cares about, blockchain, cryptocurrency, smart contracts, cybersecurity, cyber war, all these things, if you find these interesting, come to naorisprotocol.com and you can see some news. We have blogs there. We have videos there. There's a lot of news also in the public domain. If you want to search about us, there you can also find there. Besides the latest news, you can find there links for our socials. So Telegram, Twitter, Discord, and we have an amazing community. People can ask anything and talk about anything. Feel free to join. We'd love to have you.
Well, I love chatting with you today. And we're talking about eliminating single points of failure within existing centralized networks by turning each connected device into trusted validator nodes. And I refer back to that IBM stat there, where they said average breach detection time for large enterprises, 280 days compared to milliseconds with what you're doing there. And Also, thank you for helping everyone look beyond the smart toasters and washing machines in their house and their cars. Electric vehicles are eventually going to be servers on wheels. So much food for thought there, but just thank you for sharing that and your story with me today. Thank you.
Thank you for being an awesome human, Neil. All the best.
Wow, what an incredible guy. And I think it wasn't until I was sat down and talking to David there that you realise when you start adding up all those different devices added to your home network, such as light bulbs, home heating, smart speakers, smart plugs, TVs, homes, consoles, doorbells, toys, washing machines and cars, you could go on, and every single one of these devices does have a single point of failure. So much food for thought, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything we talked about today, because I'm conscious we probably missed a few things out too. So if you've got anything you want to add to the conversation, you get me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. Just hold down the audio button, send me an audio message, or email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. And remember, we have 2,300 interviews you can find over my website and how to work with me at techblogwriter.co.uk. But that's it for today, so just a big thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.